The champagne bubbles caught the afternoon light as I raised my glass to toast my daughter Sarah and her new husband Marcus. 3 months of planning, $28,000 from my retirement savings. And here we were at the Riverside Manor celebrating what should have been the happiest day of our lives. The reception hall sparkled with white roses and crystal centerpieces, everything Sarah had dreamed of since she was a little girl playing dress-up in her grandmother's old gowns. Marcus looked handsome in his tailored tuxedo, his arm wrapped protectively around my daughter's waist as they posed for photographs. At 35, he was 8 years older than Sarah, but his maturity had been one of the things that attracted her after her painful divorce 2 years earlier. He worked in real estate consulting, traveled frequently for business, and had swept Sarah off her feet with weekend getaways and expensive dinners during their whirlwind 6-month courtship. I should have been purely happy watching them dance their first dance as husband and wife. Instead, something nagged at the back of my mind, a whisper of unease I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was the speed of their relationship, or the way Marcus always seemed to steer conversations toward my financial situation during family dinners. He asked about my pension payments, my investment portfolio, the property taxes on my 4-bedroom colonial in Maple Grove. At the time, his questions seemed like natural curiosity from a future son-in-law wanting to understand his new family. The house had been my pride and joy for 32 years. I'd bought it fresh out of college with my first teaching job at Franklin High School, where I'd spent my entire career in the mathematics department. Every room held memories of raising Sarah after her father died in a construction accident when she was only 12. The kitchen where we'd struggled through homework assignments and burned countless attempts at dinner. The living room where we'd watched movies every Friday night, Sarah curled up beside me on the sofa with a bowl of popcorn between us. The back garden where she'd practiced for school plays and graduation speeches. At 64, I was still sharp, still active, still perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. The house was paid off, my retirement savings were substantial, and my health was better than most women half my age. I jogged 3 miles every morning, volunteered at the local literacy center twice a week, and maintained a social calendar that would exhaust people decades younger. Yet somehow, Marcus had already begun dropping hints about my living situation during the engagement period. "Don't you get lonely in that big house all by yourself, Eleanor?" he would ask with apparent concern. "Have you thought about what you'll do as you get older? Sarah worries about you being so isolated." The questions felt caring at the time, but looking back from the reception, they seemed more calculated, more strategic than genuine concern. The wedding cake stood 3 tiers tall, decorated with sugar flowers that had cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Sarah had insisted on having everything perfect, and Marcus had encouraged every expensive decision. The photographer alone cost $4,000, but Marcus had convinced Sarah that memories were priceless. Easy to say when someone else was writing the checks. As the evening wound down and guests began filtering out into the parking lot, Marcus approached me with 2 glasses of champagne and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Eleanor, we need to talk about practical matters now that Sarah and I are officially family." His tone was casual, but something about his posture suggested this conversation had been planned. We found a quiet corner near the gift table, where wrapped presents towered in elegant pyramids. The DJ was playing slow songs for the last few couples on the dance floor, and the catering staff had begun clearing tables with efficient precision. Marcus set down his champagne glass and leaned forward slightly, his expression shifting to something more serious. "Sarah and I have been discussing our living situation, and we think it would be best if we moved into your house." The words hit me like cold water. Not a request, not a suggestion, but a statement of fact delivered with casual confidence. "Your house is perfect for a young family, and you could move into something more manageable. A nice senior community where you wouldn't have to worry about maintenance or yard work." I stared at him, processing what he'd just said. This was my daughter's wedding reception, paid for with my savings, and he was sitting here telling me to give up my home. The audacity of it left me temporarily speechless. Marcus seemed to interpret my silence as consideration rather than shock. "Think about it logically, Eleanor. You're rattling around in 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. The property taxes alone must be eating into your pension. Wouldn't you prefer something smaller, more convenient? And Sarah and I could take such good care of the place. Maybe even expand it for grandchildren someday. The mention of grandchildren felt manipulative, using my love for Sarah and hopes for the future to pressure me into compliance. I found my voice, though it came out more strained than I intended. Marcus, that's my home. I've lived there for over 3 decades. I'm nowhere near ready to downsize or move into any kind of senior facility. His smile faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. Of course, I understand the emotional attachment. But practical considerations have to take priority eventually. The house is worth what, $400,000? Maybe more in this market. That's a substantial asset just sitting there when it could benefit the whole family. He was talking about my home like a stock portfolio, something to be liquidated for maximum return. The reception continued around us, other families celebrating and making toasts, while my new son-in-law calculated the value of my life's work with casual efficiency. I need to think about this, I said finally, hoping to end the conversation before I said something I might regret. Tonight is about celebrating you and Sarah, not discussing real estate transactions. Marcus nodded agreeably, but his eyes had taken on a calculating quality I'd never noticed before. Of course, take all the time you need. But don't wait too long, Eleanor. These decisions get harder as we get older, and Sarah worries about you making rational choices about your future. The drive home felt surreal. Sarah and Marcus had left earlier for their honeymoon in Tuscany, another expensive trip that Marcus had insisted was necessary for their relationship. The house felt too quiet after the noise and celebration of the reception, and I found myself walking through each room as if seeing it with new eyes. The living room where I'd hosted book club meetings for 15 years. The dining room where Sarah had brought her first boyfriend for dinner when she was 16. The master bedroom where I'd recovered from pneumonia 2 winters ago, surrounded by cards and flowers from friends and former students. Every space held memories that Marcus apparently considered irrelevant obstacles to his housing plans. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table where I'd graded thousands of papers and prepared countless lesson plans. The morning newspaper lay folded beside my reading glasses, full of stories about scams targeting elderly homeowners and families torn apart by financial disputes. Had I been so focused on Sarah's happiness that I'd missed obvious warning signs about Marcus? The next morning brought a text message from Sarah, sent from their hotel in Florence. Mom, Marcus mentioned you two talked about living arrangements last night. I hope you'll seriously consider his suggestions. He just wants what's best for all of us. The message felt wrong somehow, too formal, too much like Marcus's voice rather than Sarah's usual casual texting style. I spent the morning researching Marcus's background online, something I probably should have done months ago when Sarah first brought him home. His LinkedIn profile looked professional enough, listing various real estate consulting positions over the past 5 years. But the details were vague, and cross-referencing dates revealed some inconsistencies. He claimed to have been working in Chicago during the same period. His previous profile showed employment in Phoenix. His Facebook page painted a picture of successful business travel and satisfied clients, but something felt manufactured about the posts. Stock photos of office buildings, generic testimonials that could have applied to any consultant in any industry. For someone who supposedly helped small businesses improve their operations, he showed remarkably little specific knowledge about actual business challenges. I called my friend Janet, who'd worked in human resources for 30 years before retiring. Can you help me verify someone's employment history? I asked, trying to sound casual about what felt like investigating my own son-in-law. Eleanor, what's going on? Janet's voice carried immediate concern. You sound worried about something. I explained Marcus's proposal from the wedding reception, his questions during the engagement, and my growing unease about his background. Janet listened without interruption, her silence more telling than any immediate response. Honey, that sounds like a classic setup for elder fraud. Men who target older women through their adult children, gain access to family finances, then pressure victims into signing over property or assets. I've seen it happen to 3 women in my neighborhood over the past few years. The words sent ice through my veins. Elder fraud. The possibility hadn't even occurred to me, but suddenly Marcus's behavior made terrible sense. His rapid courtship of Sarah. His intense interest in my financial situation. His immediate post-wedding demand for my house. It was textbook predatory behavior disguised as family planning. Janet, what should I do? My daughter is on her honeymoon with someone who might be planning to steal my home. First, don't panic. Second, document everything you can remember about his behavior and background research. Third, contact a lawyer who specializes in elder fraud cases. You need professional advice before this goes any further. I spent the afternoon creating a detailed timeline of Marcus's relationship with Sarah, noting every conversation about my finances, every suggestion about my living situation, every question about my house and property. The pattern was clear once I laid it out chronologically. From their second date, Marcus had been gathering intelligence about my assets and vulnerability. The lawyer Janet recommended, Patricia Chen, agreed to see me the next morning. Her office in downtown Springfield was modest but professional, lined with law books and certificates that suggested decades of experience in family law and elder protection cases. Mrs. Thompson, Patricia said after reviewing my notes, you're describing a sophisticated operation. These men often target recently widowed women through their adult children, using romance and family pressure to gain access to assets. The fact that he's pushing for immediate property transfer is a major red flag. What can I do to protect myself? And what about Sarah? She has no idea what kind of man she's married. First, we secure your assets immediately. Transfer accounts to new banks, change all passwords and security questions, update your will to include specific fraud protections. Second, we investigate Marcus's background more thoroughly. I have contacts who specialize in uncovering false identities and criminal histories. Patricia's tone was matter-of-fact but not alarmist. She'd clearly handled similar cases before and understood both the legal and emotional complexities involved. The investigation will take about a week. In the meantime, avoid any financial discussions with Marcus, don't sign any documents, and keep detailed records of all interactions. I left her office feeling simultaneously relieved and terrified. Relieved that I'd taken action before Marcus could implement whatever plan he had in mind. Terrified about what this meant for Sarah's marriage and our family relationships. How do you tell your daughter that her new husband might be a criminal without destroying your relationship with her forever? The investigation results arrived by courier exactly 1 week later, contained in a manila envelope that felt heavy with implications. Patricia had uncovered information that transformed my suspicions into confirmed facts. Marcus Williams wasn't even his real name. The man my daughter had married was actually Marcus Weber, and he had a criminal history spanning 3 states and at least 7 years. Fraud charges in Nevada that had been dismissed on technicalities. A restraining order filed by a woman in Colorado whose elderly mother had lost her house to forged documents. 2 marriages in Arizona that had ended in suspicious property transfers and subsequent divorces. The most damning evidence was a police report from Oregon, where Marcus had been investigated for targeting Ruth Blackwood, a 72-year-old retired librarian whose son had married Marcus's then-girlfriend. Within 6 months of that wedding, Ruth had been pressured into signing a power of attorney that gave Marcus control over her finances. By the time family members realized what was happening, Ruth's house had been sold and the proceeds transferred to accounts Marcus controlled. Ruth had died in a state-run nursing facility 18 months later, never having recovered from the financial devastation Marcus had inflicted. The criminal charges had been dropped when Ruth became too ill to testify, but the pattern was clear. Marcus specialized in targeting elderly homeowners through their adult children, using marriage as a cover for systematic theft. I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by photographs of Sarah's childhood and wedding, trying to reconcile the smiling man in the pictures with the criminal profile Patricia had uncovered. How many other families had he destroyed? How many other mothers had sat at kitchen tables like this one, realizing they'd welcomed a predator into their homes? Patricia called within an hour of my receiving the report. Eleanor, we need to act immediately. Sarah and Marcus return from their honeymoon tomorrow, and based on his previous patterns, he'll likely present you with legal documents within days of their return. We need law enforcement involved before he has a chance to implement whatever plan he has prepared. The meeting with Detective Ray Morrison felt surreal. I'd never imagined myself sitting in a police station, filing a report about my own son-in-law for fraud and identity theft. Detective Morrison was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with a kind of professional demeanor that suggested he'd handled similar cases before. Mrs. Thompson, what you're describing is part of a larger pattern we've been tracking across multiple states. Marcus Weber, or whatever he's calling himself now, is wanted for questioning in connection with at least 12 cases of elder fraud. The problem is proving criminal intent before he actually commits the crime. What do you mean? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. We can't arrest him for thinking about stealing your house. We need evidence of actual criminal activity. Forged documents, fraudulent power of attorney, false representations to financial institutions. Until he takes concrete steps toward illegal activity, we can only monitor the situation. Detective Morrison explained the legal limitations while Patricia took notes and asked pointed questions about evidence requirements and surveillance options. The plan that emerged was both simple and terrifying. I would return home and act normally while law enforcement prepared to document Marcus's criminal activity. We'll install monitoring equipment in your house, Detective Morrison explained. When Marcus presents his fraudulent documents or pressures you to sign property transfers, we'll have everything recorded for evidence. It's the only way to build a case that will stand up in court and protect other potential victims. The technical installation took place the following morning while Sarah and Marcus were still traveling. Two specialists spent 4 hours hiding cameras and audio equipment throughout my house, each device smaller than a quarter and completely invisible once positioned. The monitoring station was established in an unmarked van parked 3 houses down, with backup units positioned throughout the neighborhood. Detective Morrison tested the communication system one final time before Sarah and Marcus's expected arrival. Mrs. Thompson, remember that your safety is our absolute priority. If you feel threatened at any point, use the panic button immediately. We'll have officers inside your house within 30 seconds. The panic button was disguised as a pendant, hanging from a chain around my neck like a piece of jewelry. Pressing it would bring armed officers through my front door within moments, but it would also end any chance of gathering enough evidence to stop Marcus from targeting other families. I spent the afternoon trying to maintain normal routines while knowing that every room contained surveillance equipment and every conversation would be recorded for potential use in court. The house felt the same but different, like a stage set designed to look like my home rather than the actual place where I'd lived for 32 years. Sarah called from the airport at 6 o'clock, her voice bright with honeymoon happiness and Italian sunshine. Mom, we're home. We have so many pictures to show you, and Marcus bought the most beautiful gifts. We'll be there in about an hour, okay? I assured her I was looking forward to seeing them, which was both true and false. I desperately wanted to see Sarah and hear about her honeymoon, but I dreaded facing Marcus now that I knew his true identity and criminal history. How do you look at someone and pretend not to know they've destroyed multiple families and caused at least one death through systematic theft? The hour passed with agonizing slowness. I made coffee, arranged the gifts I'd bought for their return, and tried to practice looking surprised when Marcus eventually revealed his plans for my house. The surveillance equipment made me hyper-aware of every movement and gesture, knowing that everything would be analyzed later by law enforcement professionals. Their car pulled into the driveway exactly when Sarah had predicted, and I watched through the living room window as Marcus helped her with luggage and shopping bags. He looked relaxed and confident, probably assuming that his wedding night conversation had softened me up for whatever proposal he'd prepared during the honeymoon. Sarah burst through the front door with vacation energy, hugging me tightly and chattering about museums and restaurants and the amazing hotel overlooking the Tuscan countryside. She looked happy in a way I hadn't seen since before her divorce, which made what was about to happen even more heartbreaking. Marcus followed with their suitcases, smiling warmly and thanking me again for making their wedding so perfect. "Eleanor, you really outdid yourself with that reception." Everyone said it was the most elegant celebration they'd ever attended. His charm felt more sinister now that I knew it was a carefully practiced performance designed to lower my defenses. They spent an hour showing photos and sharing stories from their trip, and for brief moments I forgot about the surveillance equipment and criminal investigations. This was my daughter, glowing with newlywed happiness, and part of me wanted to believe that Marcus genuinely loved her despite his predatory behavior toward me. But as the evening wore on, Marcus began steering the conversation back toward practical matters and future plans. "Sarah, why don't you show your mother the house listings we looked at online? We found some beautiful retirement communities that would be perfect for someone in Eleanor's situation." Sarah pulled out her tablet with obvious reluctance. "Mom, I know this is a sensitive topic, but Marcus thinks it might be good for you to consider your options. Some of these places are really nice, with activities and healthcare support and social opportunities." I looked at the screen, scrolling through images of generic apartment complexes and institutional dining rooms, everything designed to make independent living seem impossible and assisted living seem appealing. The manipulation was sophisticated, using my daughter's concern to pressure me into accepting what amounted to exile from my own home. "These places look very nice," I said carefully, knowing that Detective Morrison was listening to every word, "but I'm not ready to make any major life changes right now. I'm healthy, active, and perfectly capable of maintaining my own home." Marcus leaned forward with practiced sincerity. "Course you are, Eleanor. But wouldn't it be nice not to have to worry about maintenance and yard work and property taxes? Sarah and I could handle all those responsibilities, and you could focus on enjoying your retirement." Here it was, the proposal I'd been dreading and expecting. Marcus was offering to take over my house under the guise of helping me avoid responsibilities I'd never complained about. The beauty of his approach was that it sounded reasonable on the surface, a loving son-in-law helping his elderly mother-in-law transition to a more manageable lifestyle. "What exactly are you suggesting?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Well, Sarah and I have been thinking about starting a family soon, and your house would be perfect for children. Great schools, safe neighborhood, plenty of space to grow. If you moved somewhere more suitable for your age, we could take over the mortgage and maintenance responsibilities." "There is no mortgage," I said quietly. "The house has been paid off for 8 years. Marcus's smile flickered almost imperceptibly. "Even better. No financial obligations to transfer, just a simple property deed change. We could handle all the legal paperwork to make sure everything is proper and official." Legal paperwork. Exactly what Patricia had warned me about, and exactly what Detective Morrison needed to hear for his investigation. Marcus was proposing to handle property transfer documents himself, which meant forged signatures and fraudulent notarization. I just needed to play along long enough for him to reveal his criminal methods. "I appreciate the offer," I said slowly, "but this is all happening very fast. I need time to think about such a major decision." Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand. "Mom, we don't want to pressure you, but maybe it would help to talk to someone professional about your options. Marcus knows a real estate attorney who specializes in helping seniors with property transitions. An attorney who specializes in elder fraud, more likely. Based on Patricia's research, Marcus worked with corrupt legal professionals who provided fraudulent documentation for his property theft schemes. Sarah had no idea she was being used as a conduit for her husband's criminal proposals. Maybe we could meet with this attorney next week, I suggested, knowing that Detective Morrison needed me to appear cooperative while gathering evidence of Marcus's criminal network. Perfect, Marcus said with obvious satisfaction. I'll set up an appointment for Thursday afternoon. His name is David Kellerman, and he's handled dozens of similar situations. You'll be impressed with how simple and painless the process can be. Simple and painless property theft, designed to leave victims with no legal recourse and no financial resources to fight back. I nodded agreeably while mentally preparing for what would likely be the most challenging performance of my life. The next few days passed in a strange state of suspended reality. I maintained normal routines while knowing that law enforcement monitored my every conversation and movement. Sarah called daily to check on my decision about the house, her voice carrying increasing pressure disguised as concern. "Mom, Marcus is worried that you're overthinking this. He says a lot of seniors get paralyzed by major decisions and end up making things harder for themselves and their families. Maybe it would help to make a pros and cons list. A pros and cons list about giving up my home to a criminal. The absurdity would have been funny if the stakes weren't so serious." I assured Sarah that I was carefully considering all options while Detective Morrison and his team prepared for Thursday's meeting with the fraudulent attorney. Patricia spent Wednesday afternoon coaching me on legal language and warning signs to watch for during the meeting. "Eleanor, they'll present official-looking documents with your signature already forged. Act confused but cooperative. Ask questions about specific clauses. The more they explain their fraudulent process, the stronger our case becomes." Thursday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood as I prepared for the confrontation that would either save my house or destroy my relationship with Sarah forever. Detective Morrison called at 9 to confirm that all surveillance equipment was functioning properly, and backup units were positioned throughout the neighborhood. "Mrs. Thompson, remember that David Kellerman is likely as much a criminal as Marcus. Don't trust anything either of them tells you about legal requirements or standard procedures. We need them to reveal their fraudulent methods clearly enough for criminal charges." Marcus arrived at 2 o'clock sharp, accompanied by a man in his 50s wearing an expensive suit and carrying a leather briefcase that probably contained forged documents with my signature. David Kellerman looked exactly like what Central Casting would order for a corrupt attorney. Smooth, professional, and completely untrustworthy. "Eleanor, such a pleasure to meet you," Kellerman said, shaking my hand with practiced warmth. "Marcus has told me so much about your situation. You're very fortunate to have such a caring son-in-law looking out for your best interests." They settled into my living room with theatrical confidence, Kellerman opening his briefcase and spreading documents across my coffee table like he was conducting routine business rather than orchestrating elaborate fraud. The papers looked impressively official, complete with gold seals and notary stamps that were probably excellent forgeries. "Mrs. Thompson, I've prepared all the necessary documentation for your property transfer. Everything is completely legal and properly executed. You just need to review and sign these forms, and Marcus and Sarah can take over all responsibility for the house." I picked up the first document, noting that my signature was already present at the bottom of the page. The forgery was sophisticated but not perfect, missing the slight tremor I'd developed in my handwriting after arthritis began affecting my hands 2 years ago. "This is interesting," I said carefully. "I don't remember signing this particular form." Kellerman smiled patronizingly. "Sometimes seniors don't recall every document they've signed, especially during stressful periods. The important thing is that everything is legally binding and protects your interests moving forward." Marcus leaned forward supportively. "Eleanor, you signed that last month when we discussed power of attorney arrangements. Remember? We were sitting right here at this table, and you said you wanted Sarah and me to handle your financial affairs." A complete lie, delivered with casual confidence. I'd never signed any power of attorney documents, and any conversation about financial affairs had been initiated by Marcus for information-gathering purposes. But now I understood how he operated. Create false memories through suggestions and pressure, then present forged documents as confirmation of agreements that never happened. "I'm having trouble remembering the specific details," I said, playing into their narrative while Detective Morrison recorded every word. "Could you walk me through exactly what these documents accomplish?" Kellerman launched into a detailed explanation of property transfer procedures, asset protection strategies, and legal safeguards for elderly homeowners. Every word was carefully chosen to sound helpful while describing systematic theft of my life savings and primary residence. "The beauty of this arrangement," he continued, "is that you maintain lifetime residency rights while transferring ownership responsibilities to younger family members who can handle maintenance and financial obligations. It's the perfect solution for seniors who want to age in place without worrying about property management. Lifetime residency rights that could be revoked at any time by the new owners, leaving me homeless with no legal recourse. Asset protection that protected my assets by transferring them to criminals. Legal safeguards that eliminated every actual legal protection I currently possessed. What happens if I change my mind later? I asked innocently. Can these arrangements be reversed if my circumstances change? Marcus and Kellerman exchanged a quick glance that confirmed my worst suspicions. Of course, Eleanor. Though reversing these arrangements can be complicated and expensive. That's why it's important to be absolutely certain before we proceed. Complicated and expensive because the arrangements were designed to be irreversible. Once they gained control of my property and finances, any attempt to reclaim them would require lengthy legal battles against their forged documentation and false testimony. I pretended to read through the documents more carefully, buying time while law enforcement gathered evidence of their criminal conspiracy. The papers were impressive forgeries, but they contained several legal errors that Patricia had taught me to recognize. Invalid witness signatures, impossible notarization dates, and deed transfer language that wouldn't hold up under judicial scrutiny. These documents seem very thorough, I said finally. But I think I should have my own attorney review them before signing anything additional. Kellerman's smile tightened slightly. Mrs. Thompson, I understand the desire for second opinions, but bringing additional attorneys into the process will only create delays and confusion. Everything here is standard documentation that I've used successfully hundreds of times. Marcus nodded earnestly. Eleanor, we're trying to keep this simple and straightforward. Multiple lawyers just means multiple bills and conflicting advice. David is the expert here, and Sarah and I trust his judgment completely. They were pressuring me to avoid independent legal counsel, another classic element of elder fraud schemes. Legitimate attorneys encourage clients to seek second opinions and ask questions. Criminals pressure victims to accept their documentation without verification or review. Well, I said hesitantly, I suppose if you're confident about the legal requirements. Kellerman immediately produced an expensive pen and pointed to signature lines throughout the document stack. Just initial here, here, and here, then full signatures on these final pages. The whole process will take less than 5 minutes, and then you can relax knowing everything is properly handled. This was it. The moment when I either signed away my house to criminals or revealed that I knew about their fraudulent scheme. I picked up the pen, my hand trembling slightly with genuine nervousness, and positioned it over the first signature line. Actually, I said, setting the pen down, I'm not comfortable proceeding without my own legal representation. I'd like to have my attorney review these documents before making any commitments. Marcus's face darkened immediately. Eleanor, we've been planning this for weeks. The paperwork is already prepared. The arrangements are already made. You can't back out now when we've invested so much time and effort in helping you. Helping me by stealing my house through forged documents and fraudulent legal advice. His mask was slipping, revealing the predatory anger that lurked beneath his charming exterior. This was how he'd probably reacted when other victims had resisted his pressure tactics. I understand your frustration, I said calmly, but this is my home and my decision. I need to be certain I'm making the right choice for my future. Kellerman tried a different approach. Mrs. Thompson, I've been practicing elder law for over 20 years. I can assure you that these documents are completely standard and legally sound. Seeking additional opinions will only create unnecessary delays and expenses. 20 years of elder fraud more likely. I stood up from the coffee table, forcing them to look up at me rather than maintain their position of authority. Gentlemen, I appreciate your time and effort, but I'm not signing anything today. Marcus stood up abruptly, his composure completely gone. Eleanor, you're being unreasonable. Sarah is going to be very disappointed when she hears that you're refusing to cooperate with arrangements that benefit the entire family. The threat was barely veiled. Marcus was prepared to use my relationship with Sarah as leverage, making me choose between keeping my house and maintaining contact with my daughter. It was emotional blackmail designed to break down my resistance through family pressure. Sarah will understand that I need to make informed decisions about my own property, I replied firmly. She's always supported my independence and judgment. Kellerman was packing up his briefcase with obvious irritation. Mrs. Thompson, I hope you'll reconsider before you make a decision you might regret. These opportunities don't remain available indefinitely. Another threat, suggesting that refusing their current offer might result in worse consequences later. They were revealing their true nature now that their careful manipulation had failed, showing the anger and entitlement that motivated their criminal behavior. After they left, I sat in my living room surrounded by surveillance equipment and tried to process what had just happened. I'd successfully avoided signing forged documents while gathering evidence of their fraudulent scheme, but I'd also probably triggered whatever backup plan Marcus had prepared for resistant victims. Detective Morrison called within minutes of their departure. "Outstanding work, Mrs. Thompson. We recorded everything, and their criminal intent is clearly established. But now we need to move quickly before they try alternative approaches." "What kind of alternative approaches?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "Based on similar cases, they might attempt to forge your signature without your presence, then claim you're suffering from dementia or other cognitive issues that make you unable to manage your own affairs. We need to secure your legal documentation immediately and prepare for accelerated criminal activity." The next phase of the investigation moved with military precision. Patricia obtained court orders freezing my accounts and preventing any property transfers without judicial oversight. Detective Morrison positioned surveillance teams throughout the neighborhood and installed additional monitoring equipment in my house. Within 48 hours, Marcus made his next move. I was returning from grocery shopping when I noticed an unfamiliar car parked in my driveway and strange voices coming from inside my house. Through the kitchen window, I could see Marcus with two other men, one carrying what looked like surveying equipment. I called Detective Morrison immediately from my car, watching as the men measured rooms and took photographs throughout my house. "They're inside my house without permission, conducting what looks like a professional property assessment." "We're moving in now," Detective Morrison replied. "Stay in your car until we give you the all-clear signal." Within minutes, unmarked police vehicles surrounded my house and officers moved in through the front and back doors simultaneously. I watched from my car as Marcus and his accomplices were led out in handcuffs, their confident expressions replaced by shock and panic. The surveying equipment turned out to be sophisticated document forgery tools, including signature stamps, notary seals, and legal forms pre-filled with my personal information. They'd been preparing to complete their property theft remotely, using my house keys to gather additional information and plant evidence of my supposed agreement to their arrangements. Detective Morrison approached my car with obvious satisfaction. "Mrs. Thompson, we caught them red-handed with enough evidence to prosecute multiple felony charges across several states. Your cooperation has helped us shut down a criminal operation that's been targeting elderly homeowners for at least 5 years." The arrest made local and regional news within hours, with reports describing a sophisticated elder fraud ring that had stolen millions of dollars from vulnerable victims across the Southwest. Marcus's photograph appeared on television screens throughout the city, identified as the leader of a criminal enterprise specializing in property theft through marriage fraud. Sarah called that evening from work, her voice shaking with disbelief and humiliation. "Mom, I just saw the news. I can't believe I married someone who was planning to steal your house. I feel so stupid and ashamed." "Sweetheart, you loved someone who turned out to be a professional liar and criminal. That shows your capacity for trust and affection, not poor judgment on your part. How could I not see what he really was? How could I be so completely deceived by someone I thought I knew? Sarah, he fooled police investigators, attorneys, and financial institutions across multiple states. He's been perfecting his deception for years. You're not responsible for his criminal behavior or sophisticated manipulation techniques." The conversation lasted for hours, working through Sarah's feelings of betrayal and my own guilt about the pain this situation had caused her. Her marriage was over, her trust in her own judgment was shattered, and she faced the humiliating process of annulment while Marcus awaited trial on federal charges. But as we talked, I realized that protecting my house had been about more than just financial security or property ownership. It had been about maintaining my independence, my right to make decisions about my own life, and my responsibility to prevent Marcus from targeting other families. The trial took place 4 months later in federal court, with Marcus facing charges of fraud, identity theft, forgery, and racketeering across multiple states. The evidence Detective Morrison had gathered during our investigation was overwhelming, supplemented by testimony from previous victims and financial records documenting millions of dollars in stolen assets. I testified for 3 hours, describing Marcus's manipulation tactics, his pressure to sign property transfer documents, and his use of Sarah's emotions to leverage my compliance. The jury listened intently as I explained how his charm and apparent concern had masked predatory behavior designed to steal my life savings. Sarah testified as well, describing how Marcus had isolated her from friends and family while gathering intelligence about my financial situation and vulnerability. Her courage in testifying against her own husband demonstrated the strength she'd inherited from her mother, even in the face of personal humiliation and heartbreak. The verdict came after only 2 hours of jury deliberation. Guilty on all counts. Marcus was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison with full restitution to all identified victims. His criminal network was dismantled, and law enforcement agencies across 6 states used our evidence to prosecute associated fraud cases. But the real victory wasn't legal or financial. It was the knowledge that an elderly teacher from Springfield had outmaneuvered a professional criminal and prevented him from destroying additional families. My house remained my home, my independence remained intact, and my relationship with Sarah grew stronger through the process of confronting this challenge together. 6 months after the trial, Sarah moved back into her old bedroom while she rebuilt her life and career. We spent evenings cooking dinner together and talking about her plans for graduate school, her tentative steps toward dating again, and her gratitude for having a mother who'd fought to protect our family. The house felt like home again, filled with laughter and conversation instead of surveillance equipment and hidden threats. My morning jogs took me past neighbors who'd supported me throughout the investigation, waving from their yards and stopping to ask about Sarah's recovery and my own adjustment to normal life. I never did move to a senior community or downsize to something more manageable. At 65, I was still sharp, still active, still perfectly capable of managing my own affairs and making my own decisions about where and how to live. The house that Marcus had tried to steal became a symbol of resilience.